Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you. Hello, MIT alumni, alumnae, and friends. I'm Whitney Espich, CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the MIT Alumni Forum this evening. We designed the MIT Alumni Forum series as a way to bring you back to your years of learning under the dome. We want you to engage with fascinating alumni who are taking on challenges global, local, personal, and profound in ways that only MIT people can, with mind, hand, and heart. When we talk about MIT people and their impact, I can't think of a better topic than ours tonight, in service to humankind. I hope you hear echoes there of MIT's mission statement, to work wisely, creatively, and effectively for the betterment of humankind. With that mission and shared ethos in mind, the Alumni Association recently launched the MIT Alumni Better World Service Initiative. Parts networking site, parts workspace, project aggregator, and storytelling platform, the service initiative connects MIT people working together to make a better world through their volunteer efforts across climate sustainability, human health, STEM education, social justice, and more. I know that we have some events dedicated to the initiative as part of this forum's surround, so I will just say please visit our website at alum.mit.edu to learn more. And on to tonight's discussion. I can't think of a better moderator for tonight's discussion of service than MIT alumnus Kevin Churchwell. Dr. Churchwell is a specialist in pediatric anesthesia and now is the CEO of the top-ranked Boston Children's Hospital, our MIT neighbor. In addition, he is nationally recognized for 3 decades of leadership on equity and inclusion efforts in the medical profession. Dr. Churchwell is a current member of the MIT Corporation and also a member of the corporation visiting committees for the MIT Institute for Medical Engineering and Science and the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. He joined the boards of the Whitehead Institute and the Boston Chamber of Commerce in 2021. At Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Churchwell leads an organization that continues to have a profound impact on the lives of children in the nation and around the globe. In fact, US News and World Report recently cited it for the 7th year in a row as the #1 pediatric hospital in the country. Those rankings are based on a number of factors, including medical outcomes, pediatric specialists, and care-related indicators of quality. We're very grateful for his time and his hard-earned perspective this evening. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Churchwell, and I hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Whitney. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think some of it was true, but I'll claim all of it if that's okay with you. You know, I'm really excited about being the host for this MIT Alumni Forum. And joining me today are 3 fellow alums of the more than 143,000 living alumni around the world. And those are always working to make a difference through service to their industry, local community, or country. So with me today are author of the memoir Fidelis from the class of '02, Teresa Fazio, founder of Tahoe STEM Academy, class of 14, David Wise, and CEO of Seeding Labs, class of '05, Melissa Wu. You can learn more about our speakers on the MIT Alumni Forum website. So there's another voice that we want to hear from tonight, and it's yours. Here's how to jump into the discussion. Right here on the live stream page is a dialogue box for your input. We have someone watching your comments and questions. You can also upvote other questions so they rise to the top. So here's how the evening's going to work. Each of the panelists will have about 5 minutes to talk to us about what they think about service based on their careers and life journeys to date. Then we'll bring all 3 together for discussion and get some of your questions answered. And now to get us started, I'm going to hand things over to Teresa Fazio. Teresa?
Thank you very much, Dr. Churchwell. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen here for a short presentation. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'll go full screen. So about 8 years ago, I was part of a writing workshop in Brooklyn, New York, at a tiny independent community library, and it was called Words After War. And its purpose was to bring together veterans and civilians from all walks of life to talk about war through the lens of writing and literature. The veterans, like myself, had all served in either Iraq or Afghanistan, and we were mostly in our 20s and 30s. And the civilians, similarly, were mostly fairly young, but had a range of experiences from grad students studying international relations or public policy or social work to people who just wanted to understand the experiences of their siblings or their parents who had served overseas at war. And through the semester-long workshop, we discussed literature from wars at home and overseas. We discussed our own stories and our own fiction and nonfiction. And through that, we got to support each other. And I noticed that it was an act of service to listen, because storytelling builds empathy, and that's how humans are wired to learn and connect. So how did I even get into that writing workshop in the first place? I'll start by telling you a little bit about my story, which begins here at MIT. I did ROTC to pay for college. And for those of you who don't know what the Reserve Officers Training Corps is, it involves the military paying for your college education in exchange for you doing military training while you're still in school, and also serving at least 4 years of active duty afterwards. So there I am at age 19, riding in a helicopter during one summer's worth of training. But I graduated into a very different environment than I thought I would, because my senior year, September 11th, happened. And that following spring, I graduated in the morning one June from MIT. And that same afternoon, I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps in front of Old Ironsides in the North End, right over there. Those are my brothers pinning my lieutenant bars on my shoulders. And the Marine Corps had no illusions about me. They took one look and said, "You are small and you are nerdy, so you will be a communications officer." And so they taught me about radios and computers and telephones and things like that during 18 months of training in Quantico, Virginia. And at the ripe old age of 23, I deployed to Iraq. Deployment is a bit like pressing pause on your life and going overseas and having what was up until then the most intense experience of my life so far. And so there I am in Kuwait preparing for a 3-day convoy into Iraq. The base that I was on was midway between Ramadi and Fallujah, which was not the greatest of neighborhoods at the time. We got mortared a fair bit every week or 2 weeks. There I am doing my job in front of a bunch of, as advertised, telephones and computers, a cup of coffee in hand, pistol on hip. But as part of a headquarters battalion, we also had the mortuary affairs platoon and the surgical shock trauma platoon with us. So day in and day out, the dead and wounded were also coming through our base. What this all amounted to was a cauldron of intense emotion among the folks who served on the base. There was fear, there was anxiety, there was anger, there was also hilarity and love. It was incredibly intense, and also included long periods of boredom punctuated by frantic activity. But if going on deployment is like pressing pause on your life, homecoming is like pressing play. You've gone overseas and had this incredibly intense experience, and then you come home and America seems very much the same. The mall is still there, the roads are still there, you can drive your car to the mall, but internally you've changed. And this experience I didn't talk about at all to anybody for a long time, not for the 2 years subsequently that I served in the Marine Corps, not for the 5-year entirely different graduate degree I did after getting out of the Marine Corps. It was only about 7 years after that deployment that I felt an emotional distance enough from it to be able to unpack it. But the way that I choose to do that was through writing. And so in having these intense emotions and stories overseas, I learned how to convey them via veterans writing workshops in New York City, which is where I was living at the time. So NYU had a really great one. The 14th Street Y had Voices from War. You can look these up on the internet if you're in the area and interested. And there was also Words After War, where I learned the power of empathy through storytelling. Fortunately, there were some connections in these writing workshops that enabled me to publish articles in the mainstream press to get the word out about what veterans were experiencing these days. And the first couple of articles I had published in the New York Times in particular were intensely personal. And they revealed things that up until then, I had never revealed to anyone, not even my family. And having that out there in the world was both a liberating and a terrifying experience until I started getting messages from people I had served with, people I knew collegially, but didn't know really well on a personal level. And what they said to me was, "Hey, thanks for getting the word out. Don't tell anybody, but I had the same experience. You're not alone in this." And it was in realizing that not only was I not alone in that, but that my story had made other people feel less alone. that I learned that the power of storytelling really helps people empathize with each other. And also, it's an act of service to tell your own story if it helps somebody else feel less alone. Even more, it's an act of service to listen to somebody else's story, to take the risk to learn about someone's experience that might be incredibly different from yours. So there's my book. It's an intensely personal memoir of deployment and homecoming and war's aftermath. And if it makes even one person on this earth feel less alone, it will have done its job. But before I end, there's a question I'd like folks to be able to answer in the chat. If you, as an act of service, could listen to anybody's story, whether in your community, in your family, from somebody overseas, maybe someone with a different perspective from you, whose story would you want to hear? Please feel free to type it in. And Dr. Churchwell, thanks so much.
Teresa, thank you. Thank you for that incredible story. And, you know, we learn by listening sometimes. We learn by understanding and appreciating others, their history and the stories that they tell. And yours is something that I learned from. So the chat is open. And we're looking for any answers to the question that Teresa presented. You know, while we're waiting, I thought about your question, and the person that I would want to listen to is the person I had a chance to actually listen to, Teresa, and that was my father. My father served in World War II. He was born in 1917, and so he had the what he called the opportunity to serve in World War II. And it took him 40 years, actually, Teresa, to actually start talking about his experience. And when he started talking about them, I was totally blown away. I didn't know he was at the Battle of the Bulge. I didn't know he was at Normandy, never talked about it. But in talking about it, it brought out an emotion that I didn't know was there. But I learned a lot about him, and I learned a lot about his experience. And that actually helps, I think about that in terms of my experiences. So that's the person that I would, you know, want to hear their story. Great. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Next, we'll ask David to talk about, to understand his own story and how it meshed with others in the community. And so David Wise, would you mind sort of talking to us for a few minutes about your story?
Thanks, Dr. Churchwell. I want to start by talking about a community robotics team. Now, I'm sure that this will look familiar to many of you, and that many of you will have participated in a program just like this. It's not a particularly novel experience. In fact, I think it's been around since longer than I've been alive. But this team is different. This is the first team like it for kids in the South Lake Tahoe area. This is something that I desperately wanted to do when I was growing up here. Now, 10 years later, I get to be the one that provides this kind of opportunity for these kids. This is why I founded Tahoe STEM Academy. It's a mobile learning lab where I can bring high quality, hands-on science and engineering projects to kids in my hometown. It's all the things that I wished I had here growing up. Now, I want to go back to where it started. So there's a direct connection between the work I'm doing now and wandering into the Edgerton Center as a freshman. I stayed late one night for the promise of pizza and laser cutter training to help prep soldering kits, just like this one, for a bunch of local schools. This led to more involvement in the MIT student clubs and teams with Formula SAE and Marine Robotics team, and then more and more K through 12 outreach opportunities through the Edgerton Center. I can't thank my mentor there, Ed Moriarty, enough, both now and when I was a student. He has a passion for showing and really seeing the potential and the passions in people, even when they might not see it themselves. He saw that I really enjoyed this and helped encourage me and taught me how to make teaching fun. However, after graduation, I had a bit of a linear mindset about what constituted success. I left. My degree said ocean engineering. I figured I should go be an ocean engineer. I went and worked at a startup, and 2 years later decided that that might not have been the best career path for me. I moved home and started working with a friend on building a summer science and engineering camp after a brief stint as a ski bum ski instructor, of course. After a few years of the summer camp, the pandemic hit. I wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for kids to continue learning in person with hands-on projects, something that was in short supply in the community. To do that safely during a global pandemic, it took a lot of creative thinking. We taught outside in the snow in the middle of winter, multiple robotics classes, soldering, things like that. I knew I needed a way to move all this gear around, which led to buying a trailer on Craigslist. I started restoring it and making it into a mobile makerspace. Now, there's no denying that this isn't anything like Marty Culpepper's lab or Papalardo, but it works for me. My dad was a contractor. I grew up on job sites, and he really instilled in me a value of being able to use tools and fix things, something that I think isn't necessarily taught as much as it should be. So I like that I can, with this mobile lab, combine more digital cutting edge technologies, programming, 3D printing, with some more old school ones, something like sewing, blacksmithing, or woodworking. And after a while, the community took notice of this. I'm proud to announce that in the next few weeks, the Boys and Girls Club will be opening a new building here, and we'll have a permanent home to really expand the scope of opportunities that we can offer, especially to kids that might not otherwise get these kind of opportunities from different socioeconomic backgrounds or more diverse backgrounds. Now, I'm not going to make any sort of claim about being a leading expert in engineering or education or anything like that, but this works for me. I feel I can be an expert at teaching STEM in my community because of all the work I put into understanding my community. I ask for help, I talk to a lot of stakeholders, and they really help guide me towards finding a solution that fit perfectly for the type of community that Tahoe has. I get to show kids that science and engineering isn't a big scary thing. It's silly, it's inventive, it's fun. It's, as Ed would always say, it's the rules for understanding the magical world around us. You know, MIT taught me how to find the answers to this kind of problem, but it didn't necessarily teach me the answers to it. And I know that my path might not be one that most students would consider at MIT. I know I didn't, moving back to your hometown and teaching, but it's a chance for me to really give back and make a difference in my community. The small things make way more of a difference than you might ever realize. You know, if you do things for the right reasons, people will notice. Now, it's been 5 years of working with a lot of these kids. You know, I look at those photos and you see kids like Aria or Jay or Jacob or Logan, and they're starting to think about what they want to do after they graduate high school. They're talking about wanting to work at NASA or go into oceanography or go into robotics. And I feel I'm about 1 to 2 years away from the wave of letter of recommendation requests, and I really look forward to writing them. You know, I want to encourage you to go out in your community, even if it's a tiny project, something with a really small scale. It makes a difference. You know, approach your service with an engineering mindset. Think about how it will work, but also plan on failing fast and iterating to find the solution. Start small, do something right now, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I really am curious, what opportunities did you think you wish you would have had when you were in elementary or middle or high school? What were you really looking for when you were that age?
Well, thank you, David. What a presentation. So the question is, what growing up, what opportunities would we be looking for? What we were looking for that weren't available or that we wanted to be available. So so put your answers in the chat and we're happy to read them. While we wait for answers, gosh, I'm thinking about that, David. And I grew up in the South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee in the 60s and 70s. So I'm thinking about that in terms of what opportunities. Actually, one opportunity is to have you as a teacher, to be honest with you, to have someone like you in terms of your enthusiasm and your ability to communicate would have been just wonderful. Great. So you're getting a lot of shout outs, David. So, and you deserve them. So thank you for your presentation. And so we'll keep going. So next, the idea, the fact that even small acts of service can make an enormous difference is the premise behind the organization led by our final speaker, Melissa Wu. So Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much. And I want to start a little bit, talking about the pandemic as well. The past 2 years of the pandemic has been alternatingly terrifying, depressing, anxiety inducing, and I've never had a more stressful time in my life. But it's also highlighted for the public in a way that's, I don't think ever been so clear that research is critical for our existence. And it's also spurred in me another feeling shared by scientists across the globe. And that is the feeling that this is a moment for us to act urgently. And at Seeding Labs, we support scientists in least resource countries. And during the pandemic, like everyone else, it was a time for them to act urgently. So on April 15th, 2020, I got a text from Dr. Gama Bendawe, a medical virologist from Malawi, who was a consultant for their national response. He wrote to me that the whole country has run about 300 tests cumulatively since this issue began, and we drift between hope and despair from day to day. He knew he had to do something. He and his colleagues had the expertise to run COVID-19 diagnostics, but they needed a few pieces of equipment to perform this work safely. We reached out to our network and we managed to get them a biosafety hood and another RT-PCR machine. By September, their lab was up and running, and it was the 5th lab in the country accredited by the Ministry of Health to run COVID-19 diagnostics. Looking back, working in the midst of shutdowns, stoppage of transportation, getting them the equipment they needed went incredibly fast. But knowing that lives were hanging in the balance, it wasn't fast enough. Like almost everything I've experienced during this pandemic, I never want to have to do that again. And the good thing is, we don't have to wait until the world is in imminent crisis to act. At Seeding Labs, it's our mission to ensure that scientists across the globe have the resources that they need to train the next generation and advance research important to their communities. We started back in 2003 as a group of scrappy graduate students who'd worked in labs across the world and saw what it meant when you had limited funding. At a Rice Research Institute in Cote d'Ivoire, scientists were rewashing tubes and gloves that you normally throw away after one use. A biology department in Tanzania had just enough funding to build their labs, and then nothing left over to purchase equipment. We saw students and scientists leaving their countries for more lucrative careers when the labs available to work just didn't cut it. And we saw that other places in the world, like in Cambridge and Boston, where we were studying, there's so much investment in R&D that excess equipment is actually a problem. And we found a way to connect these surplus instruments to places where they're needed. So for more than a decade, we've been seeding labs at universities in many of the least resource countries across the globe. In the Dominican Republic, we helped establish the first research center in the country dedicated to studying tropical diseases. And within 6 months, they had 9 new research programs running. We outfitted the University of Namibia with equipment used by the first class of pharmacy technicians to train in country. In numerous other places, we're seeing the introduction of new graduate level programs. Our partners are bringing in new funding that's reached over $11 million, and the ability for our researchers to finally pursue the work that's most important to them. Today, Seeding Labs is still a small team of 10, but we're powered by people like you working in over 200 organizations in the life and chemical sciences. Manufacturers like Thermo Fisher, equipment distributors like Netta Scientific, pharmaceutical companies like Takeda, universities, and even government labs, clinics, individual bioenthusiasts, all donating equipment to support their peers in less resourced labs. Investing in R&D capacity the way that we have has meant that researchers and educators have the flexibility to address the challenges that they find most important. And back to the start of the pandemic, we saw that many of the labs we had supported had the capacity to quickly pivot to meeting the challenge of COVID-19. In Ghana, Dr. Kwabena Dueru faced a similar situation as Dr. Bendawe in Malawi. In March of 2020, like in Malawi, there were only 2 testing facilities in the country, and they had a backlog of weeks before returning testing results. Dr. Dueru knew, like Dr. Bendawe, that he had the skills to help. And by April, he was already running coronavirus tests and reducing the turnaround time to 2 to 3 days. The difference, why was he able to act so quickly? We actually had sent his department equipment in 2016, which made it possible, which made all his efforts possible. Although it may not feel like it, there's innumerable grave and equally urgent problems that we need to solve, whether it's addressing COVID-19 or climate change, toxicity in our environment, food insecurity, technologies to support local industries, Seating Labs is working to ensure that no matter where you are, you have the resources to solve our future challenges today. And all of you can be a part of the solution. Many of you are working in labs, you know people working in labs. Maybe you're part of a company producing, selling, or distributing laboratory equipment. A single piece of equipment in the hands of the right person can make a new future possible. And so I hope to ask you, can you connect us to a lab, to a company that might have laboratory equipment that could change lives?
Great. Thank you, Melissa. What an impact. So Melissa's asked the question. Curious from the chat, any responses, any comments? From one alum, Melissa, there was a comment that they've been spreading the word about you, Seating Labs to Latin America, Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia for several years. And they never knew you were an alum of MIT. So small world. So kudos to you and the work that you're doing. So we'll continue on. And so next, what we'd like to do is actually bring all the speakers together. And so we're going to all be on one sort of video with the goal that I'm going to start by asking some questions that I'll ask David and Melissa and Teresa to speak upon. But the goal is for you to also ask your questions. So first, I want to thank you, our audience, for being here today, for taking the time to be with us tonight, and for all the good work that you're doing to make this a better world. And so remember, we love seeing your responses and your questions. So we'd encourage that as we move forward. So gang, I'm going to get started. So I was really struck by the ways each of you found a calling to service by listening, observing the community around you. And I think one of the great things about an MIT education, I think you would agree with this, is the different ways we were taught to observe facts, circumstances, situations on all scales, and then work to try to ask the right questions about them. Now, I'll be honest with you, I never got that far to ask the right questions, but I at least tried to ask the right questions about those circumstances. So here's the question. What do you think makes people go from seeing a situation, an opportunity to serve, and then taking action to do something about it? So Teresa, I'll start with you if that's okay, to get your thoughts around that.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's always easier to volunteer for something that you're passionate about or something that you really love doing or happen to be really good at. And so when an opportunity out in the community matches one of your personal passions, whether say that is art or being in a makerspace like David's stuff, or robotics, or being with kids, or being with the elderly, a specific community, when it matches something you're passionate about and good at, it's kind of a no-brainer to do that. I process the world through writing. That's why I went to all those writing workshops. So, but yeah, everybody's got different types of passions.
Great. So David, what your thoughts around that?
I really agree with Teresa. I think it's having a connection to the work. And I think it's also making sure that you connect with people, that there is measurable success in a short period of time. You didn't have to make a difference for the whole world at once, but you made a difference in your small corner of it. And that makes it easier to keep making another difference and just incremental steps.
Great. And Melissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little bit of two things. And like David and Teresa had said, having passion or the expertise that you feel like you know, and it gives you the confidence to make a difference. But at the same time, also maybe, and I think this is definitely the case for Seating Labs, having maybe a little bit of ignorance. So you're not afraid of the challenges ahead of you. So yeah, expertise and ignorance.
Great. And could you talk just a little bit more about how does passion help you, or can passion hinder you? Or is that a driver that sort of keeps you going when things sort of can get frustrating? Thoughts around that? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I think everybody on this panel has the MIT attitude of if some is good, more is better. So it helps right up until you're sleep deprived and burnt out. But in general, I think it's a good thing.
Great. David, your thoughts?
I think making sure that, it's like Teresa said, where you're passionate and you can keep doing more and more until it's too much, that you have to make sure that you haven't lost sight of your original project, that there's a lot of easy ways to where it's not necessarily a distraction, but it's going in a different direction, and you can't keep following all of those pivots until you lose your way.
Melissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important that when you're passionate about something, and you really want to get something done, you use that passion to bring in other people. And when you're really passionate about something, it's easy to excite people and bring them along, and it makes the challenge, whatever you're trying to do, much easier when you have the support of others. So being able to direct your passion into the broader community around you.
Right. And yeah, that just leads me another question around this, and that in all the work that you've done in this development of this service that you're committed to, how did you seek out help? Did help find you? How did that work for each one of you in terms of the work that you've been doing and you've developed? Melissa, you want to start?
Yeah, at City Lands, we started out by seeking a lot of help. And, I talked about how our program isn't possible. The work that we do isn't possible without the help of others who are donating equipment, who are engaging in the global scientific community in other ways. But what's been really incredible is once, we make that connection for people, and you see the impact, you meet the people that are part of this global community. We've had people turn to us now and ask us, how can we help? And that is just kind of an amazing goal to have achieved for us, to have it happen both ways, that we ask for help and now people are asking, how can we help?
That's great. David, very curious about how it's been for you.
Well, a perk of working in the community with kids is you effectively train your own help.
Ah.
So over 5 years, where I started working with some kids when they're in elementary school, they're currently the instructional aides for me for teaching other kids. So putting a lot of emphasis on building a community along with the service project, it makes it self-sustaining.
Great. And Teresa, your thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. There's an element of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So once you set your mind to helping in a certain way or doing a certain thing, and for me, it was writing, you start spotting all sorts of serendipitous opportunities. And for me, it was taking not only one, but in one case, like 3 at a time, writing workshops, but making those connections through those workshops and hearing of this community of veteran writers meant that we all started helping each other. And then we started running workshops of our own and kind of paying it forward. So you get this like exponential snowball happening there with people who have a good experience and then want to help.
Great, thank you. So I'll go to the next question. So you all do a lot of thinking or speaking about equity, in particular women and girls in STEM. So can you talk a little bit more about the efforts that have made you the most proud of in addressing the gender gaps that we see, whether it's your work or others that you've observed? So David, I'm going to start with you this time.
So I think what stands out to me is how difficult of a problem that is. So when I started teaching, I wrote a description for a class and didn't necessarily put all that much thought into it, just a generic robotics class. And then lo and behold, the first day it's 18 middle school boys and 2 middle school girls. And it took a lot of effort, and it took a lot of talking to female professionals in the STEM field, marketing experts, curriculum development people about what to do to actually change that. And I'm really proud that in the last year, with retooling a lot of the classes, we got much closer and in some cases exceeded a 50-50 ratio.
Right. When you think back on it, was there a key that unlocked that, or was it just doggedness of just working through many opportunities that really opened that door?
it really was finding classes and curriculum that people didn't necessarily think of as STEM. So in the case of one of those photos, it's Monster Lab. The kids make a stuffed animal that they bring to life with electronics and programming and a voice box, but they also have to learn how to sew, and it's artsy and make patterns. And then you get a mix of everyone. It's not necessarily the preconceived notion that someone may or may not have about the class.
Great. So Teresa, your thoughts?
Sure. So I guess two things. One is my day job is actually at MIT Lincoln Lab, and they have their really great outreach program for girls in STEM, girls who code, and things like that. So employees are allowed to do that. So I'm quite proud of my fellow employees who have all done that outreach. But the second thing is some of this will involve not only bottom up, but top down policy. And my experience has been mainly in reporting on the gender gap in the military. For example, women in combat arms or women in certain occupational specialties that are dominated by men. Having served in the Marine Corps, it was a whopping 7% female when I was in. I think now it's up to 9% female. So clearly there's a gender gap there. But in the military's case, it's been a combination of top-down policy and also looking to other countries. So I was lucky enough to get a fellowship to go to Sweden and look at what they do, because when they actually have compulsory service and they draft young women as well as young men. So seeing some of the policies that they had put into place allowed me to report on things that might be useful for the United States. So it's kind of a both and situation.
Great. And so do you think that we've made progress from that standpoint, or, what's the next evolution that you think we need to be moving toward to make a difference here?
Yeah, I mean, we have made some in that since 2016, women have been allowed to serve in all occupational specialties in the military. I think we certainly still have a long ways to go in terms of normalizing, roles such that they're not necessarily gendered at all, but also, and this is a bigger societal conversation, but the way that we raise boys in general, and girls, but there's been a lot of girl power. Which is terrific. Also letting boys know, like, it's okay, no matter what, you don't have to have this, toxic masculinity attitude. And different parts of the country, different communities, even different families are different in those ways. So I think it's an evolution. We're kind of at a hinge point in history. If you think of, I'm 41, so even over my lifetime, things have changed a lot in that realm. I imagine in the next few decades, they'll change a lot too.
Great. And Melissa, love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm really proud of a partnership that we have with Schlumberger Foundation. They've got this program called Faculty for the Future, where they're funding graduate student programs for women coming from developing countries. And the goal of the program is to really build up that capacity and build up the number of women who are working across the globe in STEM fields. And they hope that the fellows will return to their home countries and start programs in research that also support students. And we know that one of the major barriers for women being retained in academia and maintaining their research careers is access to the equipment. So we've partnered with them to actually support the research environments of their returning fellows. And it's been incredible to see them actually using our equipment to create programs that are actually, designed to accelerate the pipeline for STEM in places where, everywhere in places where female, attendees, undergraduates might be 25% to places where they're achieving over, 70% females in, in the STEM sciences. So I think it's a great way for us to be able to impact that space.
So it sounds like you're seeing acceptance, you're seeing opportunity in the work outside across the world from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think by working with people who are doing, we're not actually implementing and creating these programs that are supporting the entry of girls and women in the sciences. But by making it possible for other women to have a successful career, to have a successful place to do their research, and be able to go back home and build up that capacity there, I think that's really rewarding.
Great, thank you. So I have one more question, then we're gonna open it up to the audience in terms of your questions. So please sending them into the Q&A. Joe, I can't see the Q&A, so whatever I need to do, please let me know to make sure that we see those questions.
We
So
just
here's
need you to
what-
open your chat, Dr. Churchwell. Thank you.
Right, yeah, I've got my chat open.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So we'll be putting them in there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So I've got one more question. So here it is. How might we change the communities we live in, whether the few blocks around us or an entire nation, if service or civic engagement were higher priorities in citizens' minds? That may be a rhetorical question, but I'd love to get your thoughts around, how do you think we ought to address that? So Melissa's okay. I'll start with you.
Yeah, I really encourage people to think about service, not necessarily as something extra that you do, but something that's a part of your daily life. I mean, you could be doing anything. You could be a salesperson for equipment in Seating Labs land. And you could, by talking about equipment and bringing the idea of Seating Labs to your customers, you can make service part of your daily job. And so, that's an example from Seating Labs, but you can bring that to anything, regardless of what your work is. I think there's ways that doing your job, actually, you can find a way that you can spread it to engaging a broader community than what your day-to-day is.
Great, thank you. Teresa, your thoughts?
Sure. So much like Melissa, I think building examples of civic engagement into education from the bottom up, including it in curricula, having it be normalized that, yes, we help others, and that's part of how we are a community and how we maintain our community. Having that be normalized from earliest childhood, I think, is a great way to wind up with adults who are familiar with civic engagement because it's just part of what they do. There is also an argument for national service of some sort, and it doesn't have to be military, but potentially Conservation Corps or Elder Care or Teach for America or things like that. I think those could be incredibly valuable programs if we got it together to unify around causes like that.
Yeah, great. And David, your thoughts?
I echo what Teresa said, that I really think having some sort of service component as our ethos would do a huge amount for our communities. In high school, I worked with California Conservation Corps and did that job for my summer, and I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have otherwise met. And I think it really highlights the impact of that living in a small town. There's a lot of small town politics and a lot of small town drama, but service is a good way for getting mutual respect and going beyond that. Like, people respect you for being authentic and doing things for the right reasons, and service is one of those. It doesn't matter if you are arguing about whether or not there should be a new roundabout or a new crosswalk, but you can at least all come to the table and break down some of the silos through different service projects.
Great, great. So we've got a few questions from the audience, and so I'm going to start with the first one. And this is a question for Teresa. Have you ever shared your stories with the current MIT NROTC students? What would you most like them to know about your experiences?
Oh boy. So I have not yet. So I guess you get the preview here. What I would tell them is that, and they'll find this out, I tell this to everybody, but there is no one single way to be a military member or to be a veteran. So if you go into the military, people have diverse experiences, vastly different. Some deploy, some don't. Some serve in combat arms occupational specialties. Others are cooks and supply folks and communications folks and administrators. But it takes everybody pulling together. The other thing I would tell the MIT Naval ROTC specifically, because I learned this the hard way too, is that just because you have a fancy education doesn't mean you're actually useful when you're deployed. My Marines could do far more things than I could in terms of fixing, radios and computers, and satellites and things like that. And they were terrific at it. But that was really the chief lesson I learned, which is that it really does take the abilities of everybody to pull together. And some kid with a high school education and some military training can be the most valuable person if something breaks and they're the only person to fix it.
Great. So you really are talking about team and the development of team and leadership around that.
Absolutely.
The opportunity to teach that at MIT to our kids is a great opportunity because you lived it in terms of your experiences. Thank you. So here's a question for David. So the question is, David, I wish I had better connections with adults in STEM and medicine to understand those careers better. I encourage my mentees and even my kids to reach out early, but it's not easy to create those conversations. So I guess the question is, David, your thoughts on how can we create those conversations? How do we make it easier to do this type of work?
It's a really good question. I think it's always a struggle finding professionals that kids can connect with. But part of it is also people really want to be a mentor. Sometimes you just have to tell them that they're being a mentor for them to realize it, is what I've found. So just making sure that when you connect with people, you're really showing them what impact they're making on the kids when they talk to them or things like that. It goes a long ways.
You know, I think that's spot on. You know, the opportunity to be with others, to let them know that they have the opportunity to give back. Sometimes, you know, those that we work with just don't think about it or don't realize the impact that they could have. And, you know, as you describe, our ability to encourage them can sometimes make all the difference. So great. So I've got another question. I think this is for anyone. So hopefully we'll get a good dialogue started. I grew up in NYC and was fortunate that I was admitted to the Bronx High School of Science. Question is, how do we get more public schools like that to enable kids to dream? How do we get kids to, you know, what's the connection? Does it go back to the passion question, I guess, is to me? What does it take from your standpoint?
I think a big part of it, in my experience with, you know, again, being a small town, it's just being able to expose kids to disciplines and technologies and techniques that they might not otherwise see. You know, growing up here, there's one high school. And at least when I was growing up, it definitely felt like there was a smaller subset of jobs available. And I think looking forward to the future with the pandemic and the shift to remote work, that kids need to realize that they can do any job they want from just about anywhere now. And they just need to be able to see themselves in that role to really get them to start dreaming.
Great.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Melissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna answer, and it's you know, something that I've seen happen with the scientists that we work with, the students that we work with, you know, through our programs, and that's the idea that people are investing in them, strangers are investing in them, that they're part of a global community, and that's what happens, you know, when we run our programs. And that makes a huge cultural change in giving people confidence to do new things, because you know that people are standing behind you. So I think, you know, how do you create an environment where you know that people are standing behind you? And if we can do that for, you know, at all ages of education, I think that'll make a big difference in dreaming big.
Great. Teresa,
think-
your thoughts?
Sure. To build on what Melissa just said about people standing behind you, all it takes is one inspired teacher, especially in this age of remote learning, to hopefully be able to source information and to let the students learn from anywhere and learn anything. And so to be able to have a school like Bronx Science, I mean, that's kind of a community thing, right? And that's really difficult to have an entire community set that up. But if you could do it classroom by classroom or even family by family, there really is no shortage of things to learn if you've got an internet connection. So I think that does offer some sort of hope for the future.
Great, thank you. So I know we're getting close on time, but there are a few more questions. What can MIT faculty administration do to encourage graduates to consider service or opportunities like the California Conservation Corps. I feel like during my time as an undergraduate at MIT, there was a lot of pressure to join a large tech company as opposed to, I guess, what is described. And your thoughts around what the faculty can do to encourage service.
I think it's really about finding meaning in what you do. And some people find meaning in working for a large tech company, or more accurately, earning a lot of money working for a large tech company. But I think if you can connect your inner purpose to what you're doing professionally, I mean, then you can kind of, it's this almost like an internal perpetual motion machine, right? So yeah, finding, it may not be every single student who feels that sense of inner purpose, but if you have that connection, you can do things like that.
Great. Melissa, your thoughts?
That's a tough one. But I agree with Teresa, and my major was in bio, and I think a lot of mentors, when you're doing research, and we talked about passion earlier, but for a lot of people, that passion comes from personal interactions and wanting to solve the challenges that you see around you. And so even though I was doing basic research, my graduate student mentor, she had a sister with muscle disease. And so that's what brought her into studying muscle diseases. And although we were applying it to, in the basic space, it wasn't going to be a therapy for a very long time. Thinking about the work that way and knowing that you're having an impact at some point, I think that's how we can answer that question.
Yeah, great. And David, I'll let you have the last word.
That is a tricky question. I think what I think would make the most impact in that is it's easy to forget the rest of the world is not MIT while you're at MIT, and that just because every other person around you is going into a big tech company, that does not mean every person in the world is going into a big tech company. So I think giving undergrads more exposure to alternative pathways or more of the world at large can help kind of build that feeling or build that passion for different projects and get you out of that little bit of the tunnel vision there.
That's great. Well, I can tell you how I would answer it. How I would answer it is saying I would take all three of you and have you have a seminar with all the MIT faculty, and for them to hear what you're doing early on in the semester, so they can sort of see what the opportunities are, what happens when we have this MIT education, this MIT experience, and what you're doing, and the opportunity for them to expose our kids to this, I think would be a tremendous opportunity. So thank you again. Thank you for taking the time. I know we're close to finishing up. So what I'll do is stop here and just ask you just to thank you again for all that you've done and your presentations tonight. I think if we could give you a virtual round of applause, we should do that. So, and so thank you again. So just a few comments just to end this. This is a great hour, a great opportunity to hear from David, Melissa, and Teresa about the work that they've done and the experiences they've had. I think that the tie-in is really, of course, again, MIT, in that the opportunity that they've had to experience MIT in terms of education. It's not just going to class, but it is an environment that in some respects changes your worldview. I can certainly say that from my standpoint, that it changed my worldview and it changed my view of what the opportunities were. But it also describes, what responsibility we have in terms of if we're exposed to this, if we get this opportunity, what opportunities should we provide others? And that goes to that view of service and what was presented today in terms of their view of service and how they've really turbocharged it in terms of their work. So it's a great hour, and thank you and it's an honor to be part of it. So just a few things. We've recorded this broadcast and you can find it and share it on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel. That'll be within a week's time. And we certainly want your feedback about today's event. So send it to alumniforum@mit.edu. And we'll get back with you about another alumni forum next month. So this forum today wouldn't have been as compelling without the involvement of those of you who tuned in. So thank you again for joining us. If you've joined us live today, you'll find more talks on this subject all week long. And we'd love to have you join us there too, and to be engaged. So if you'd like more information about the MIT Alumni Better World Service Initiative, you can find it at alum.mit.edu/volunteer or alum.mit.edu/volunteer. You can add to that portal the service that you are providing in your community. So I think the goal of this is for you to fill it up. Let's make this portal so large that they've got to create another portal in terms of the work that you're doing. And you'll find also that from the MIT community, who are others who are doing similar type of work. So you'll see the link below that we'll provide for that. So finally, I want to thank our panelists for their time tonight. Thanks Melissa Wu, David Wise, and Teresa Fazio. Thank you for the ways that you're making this world better. And thanks to everyone for listening. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.